Welcome back.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, what's up? It's What We Have Learned, episode
7.
Woo!
What?
What are we talking about today, Randy?
Madam Blueberry.
Madam Blueberry.
I love Madam Blueberry's accent has changed so much over the years.
A lot.
We could make an entire episode on just that.
We could just play her accent. If we play, I honestly think if we played the most recent her and the Madam Blueberry we just watched,
yeah,
you'd be like, those are two different people.
Yeah,
like they're
it's
not
gotta
the
be.
same.
It's
They're
gotta be
not the
different.
same.
I know for sure there is at least two different people because I know in like Pistachio or one of those, they specifically mentioned in the commentary, it's the Pistachio or the Penniless Princess one that they like they specific mention in the commentary they needed somebody to re-record for her. So I don't know if they just that person wasn't in business anymore or passed away or like whatever. But I do know they mentioned that. So at least two different people for sure have like done this.
Well, there you go. All right, so Madam Blueberry came out July 21st, 1998. It was the 10th episode. Yeah, and, you know, the main kind of plot is she wants more stuff, gets more stuff, and eventually it is bad.
Doesn't have the stuff.
Doesn't have the stuff anymore. It has no stuff.
Has no stuff. Yeah, it's very being grateful for what you have and having a thankful heart.
Yeah.
And so I thought that would be a great thing to talk about since Thanksgiving is around the corner. Depending on when this episode comes out, Thanksgiving will have just happened or be around the corner.
Yeah. So a couple things about this. This is only the second episode where Bob and Larry don't receive a letter from a child.
Yeah, I noticed that they weren't even really talking about all that much before the French peas come onto the scene.
Yeah. Oh, this is one thing. So there's a poster at the snack bar. I don't know if you noticed this or not. I did notice this. There's a poster at the snack bar when they're eating at the Stuff Mart.
Oh, yeah.
And it's got like, it's a poster of the Larry Boy and the Fib from Outer Space, but it hadn't been released yet.
Oh.
And that poster's in the background.
See,
of
I
this
was
video.
thinking about that because they do try to sneak theirs in.
Uh-huh.
And I saw Buzzsaw Louie is hanging all over the place. And so I was wondering that. I was wondering if Buzzsaw Louie was the next one or if there was another little Easter egg I had missed.
Yeah.
So it's the Larry Boy and the Fib they were
Larry
teasing.
Boy and the Fib. Yep, they were
that's cool.
teasing that one.
One of my favorite things I've noticed Googling different stuff about this is that there's like a whole Wikipedia just for VeggieTales.
Yeah.
And I'm like, see, these are my people.
I know. Yeah, so if you want to read some of that stuff, it's called bigidea.fandom.com, where we find a lot of our information and everything. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff in this episode. There's the Art Bugatti bowling plate is in there.
Yes.
All right, so and then also the silly song in this one, His Cheeseburger. Just one of the best of all time silly songs.
Oh my gosh. When I saw that was this one, I was like, that is just so
just wraps it up
so
perfectly.
Great. We've got a friend in
We
studio
have a friend
today.
in the studio, special guest, Josie May. Yeah, so also there's another one. There's a movie poster in the food court, and it's got Goliath and the Fib. And they're fighting. Let me look that up. I'll find a picture of it and I'll show you. But yeah, I did notice that.
Goliath and the Fib, and they're fighting. I can't believe I missed that all these years.
So there it is. It's got the Fib and Goliath, and they're fighting each other in this poster behind the thing.
Okay, that is priceless.
Isn't that crazy?
Here, this is something I know we've mentioned so many times, but we have Disney and Pixar bloopers, just like a whole like episode of them on our at our house. I was telling my kids the other day, I was just like, how awesome would your job be to be like, guys, we gotta throw in some Easter eggs for these people. So your whole job is to be like, what if, and for this instance, what if Goliath is fighting the Fib?
Exactly.
Like, it's just so great because you're like, first of all, whose idea is that? Second of all, someone was like, do you know what we need?
Yeah.
Background mess.
Yeah.
You know?
And someone had to come up with that. Like, the Fib and Goliath just fighting each other.
I would say this one kind of felt a little more feature filmish, like Esther and stuff too. It was definitely not quite the same vibe as like their regular episodes,
right?
And it seemed, and I do, I thought it was kind of interesting that it was definitely didn't seem to be directly from the Bible. Or
that's another thing, because when we were watching it this morning, Leandria was even like, "What is this one about?" Like,
you're like waiting for it,
right? Because the rest of them, you got like Josh and the Big Wall, Esther, and the other ones or whatever that are basically a Bible story.
Yeah.
And this one is just, and it's not the first one that they've done like that either, because obviously the first one that they did was, they're in Junior's room a lot, and it's like the "Where's God When I'm Scared" and "Are You My Neighbor?" But then they do Rack, Shack, and Benny, Dave and the Giant Pickle, Josh and the Big Wall, and then the 10th one that they have is Madam Blueberry. And so it's like you had like this string of movies that were about a specific Bible story, and then you have this one, and you're like, okay, well, is this supposed to be a story, like a Bible story, or is it just they just are telling something?
You kind of wonder if they were like testing the waters to see how many. Do they have to do the Bible stories?
Right.
Could they do, or could they do like parable type stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, because these are all, I feel like they're very like Aesop fables-esque.
Yeah.
The ones that aren't Bible stories.
Uh-huh.
You're still learning a great lesson.
Right.
Which they do say that they kind of have those where they say stuff about like morals and lessons and stuff like to that effect. So you do kind of think they were trying to see how far they could go with that.
Yeah. There is one thing that they said that the last, like when they're showing all the stuff or whatever, and it says the kitchen sink being the last item in the visual, is a visual on the term everything but the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was kind of funny.
They do really great stuff like that in this one. I feel like everything is just so eye-catching, but there's so much of it that's so subtle, too.
Yeah.
They did a really good job with like that, like the kitchen sink.
Right.
Like, and maybe a kid wouldn't see that, but an adult would.
Yeah. So 2 more things, and then we'll move on. But this is also the first episode where Junior appears without a major role.
Oh, that's true. He's just kind of like
he's just there. He's just kind of a rando character that just shows up for a second. Because he get the ball or whatever from his dad. So it's the first time he appears without a major role. And then this is also the first time that the song "What We Have Learned" started without Bob saying, like, it's time to talk about what we learned today, or we're over here by QWERTY to talk about what we learned today.
Yeah, it just kind of goes.
Yeah, I think it's the P's are like, "Hit it, boys," or whatever.
Yeah, they do. They cue it.
And then they play it or whatever.
And they say, unless you have something to say about
it. Yeah.
Because Bob's for some reason, they made Bob be upset about this song.
Yeah.
They try to make it a little more obvious that he really just doesn't like to be interrupted.
Yeah.
Which is like cool.
Yeah.
But like as a kid, you're like, what is this dude's problem? Why does he not like this song?
Right. And then last one is this is the first episode to not feature any carrots.
Oh,
Since God wants me to forgive them. That one didn't have any carrots in it either.
And they have the little Annie girl.
Yeah.
I think that's the first time she shows up.
Her voice is Phil and Lisa Vischer's daughter. She was the one that recorded that. Yeah.
Aww, that's cute.
How cool. So
they do kind of make her mom and dad look a little like Phil.
They kind of do, honestly, when you think about it.
That's actually kind of funny. Like a French
because she's got like that like Karen haircut almost, like kind of how she had.
Funny.
Look at that, man.
I bet they did that on purpose. We wouldn't have known that.
No.
But that's kind of fun.
That is pretty cool.
They kind of stuck them in there as a family.
Yep.
Well, I did some Googling.
Yes. Tell us what you found, Randy.
And I found out that there is a French novel by Gustave Flaubert, I'm guessing. I never took French in high school. You can probably tell. But it's...
Croissant.
Yeah, right? It's like Z. Zinavo. I can sound like a French P, but I can tell you they don't actually sound French. So, womp, womp, womp. It's like learning Spanish from Dora. Like that. That's me. I'm that kid.
You're the one with the math. Don't ask me.
But anyway, it apparently has been banned in some places because of the content, so we won't go that deep into the content. But the whole thing is there's this lady who's like middle class, like mid-class French, like lady. And she is bored with her life of probably being a housemaker, I would imagine, if she's in, the times that this was written. This is written way back. Like the guy who wrote this, like his inspiration was like the guy who wrote Three Musketeers and The Hunchback of Notre Dame and things like that.
Right.
So like that era. So I imagine she's just this housewife running this, a semi-nice house.
Right.
And she's bored out of her mind. So she starts making up like a life for herself, right? Is kind of what the summary said about this book. And so anyway, the whole point is that she's super dissatisfied with her life, and she looks out into the world and kind of makes up a dream world to where she can be satisfied. And I was like, well, hot dog, if that doesn't actually describe Madame Blueberry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was just really cool because I thought that was funny, because the French P's, when they come in, they say, where are we from? And they're like, France. And they're like, oui,
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, we have a story in France and we would like to share it with you. And then they start narrating the Madame Blueberry.
Right.
And so that's why I kind of Googled it, because I actually thought it was something else this whole time. But in the back of my head, I kept thinking it can't be this other thing, because I'm pretty sure that has nothing to do with the story. And so I Googled it and I found this, Madame Bovary. So anyway, if you want a fun laugh, go Google Madame Bovary syndrome.
Fun read. 1857, Madame Bovary.
And it like sparked this whole like syndrome where you're dissatisfied with your life, like chronic dissatisfaction, which makes so much sense for Madame Blueberry. It's like really wild.
Yeah, and so it is kind of interesting though that 2 episodes ago we did the story of the prodigal son and how he was unsatisfied with the things that he had, and so then it's one of those things like, oh, that's an interesting episode, but they did this all the way back in episode 10 of
episode
talking
10.
about thankfulness,
And the whole thing about Madame Blueberry is to be thankful for what you have. The song, the little thankfulness song, be grateful or thankful. I think it says grateful. Be grateful for what you have. That's an easy way to start.
Yeah.
And it's just so simple. It's just a simple message.
Right.
But, I mean, obviously, us children needed to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah, because then she goes on, she says, because a thankful heart is a happy heart. And then you said, I'm glad for what I have. That's an easy way to start. For the love that he shares, because he listens to my prayers. That's why I say thanks every day. And I do think, as we kind of get into, why we are talking about this is that, like, we would run out of stuff, like not run out, but we would never run out of time or of things to thank God for if we really sat down and was like, okay, thank you, God, for, doing that for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that's really sweet that they tried to teach us. The thing that they try to teach us through this lesson was, it's not about what you have. And so to kind of jump into this, on the countertop, the opening countertop, Larry comes zooming by with a Jeep, and Bob's like, oh, that's really cool. Are you happy now? And he's like, well, I think if I had the camper too, I'd be happy.
Right.
And then Bob's like, how much stuff do you need to be happy? After he lists like a whole bunch of stuff.
I don't know. How much stuff is there?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, oh, and Bob's face is actually, they animated that really good. Bob's face is like, uh-oh. And that's the French P's come in and they're like, we've got you. There's a story about dissatisfaction. We've got you. And And that's where this Madame Blueberry comes in. And I thought that was really cool because, like I said, contentment and like thankfulness, you really should start learning at a young age.
Yeah.
Because honestly, once you do have that adult money, it gets way harder.
It gets so hard, especially around Christmas time.
Yeah.
And it's worse now, I think, because now it's like you've just got Amazon or Walmart app on your phone or whatever.
And you just click
and you're
buy
just like,
now.
oh, that looks like something I would like. And then you literally could just click buy now and it's already on its way to your house, like as soon as you press I want it or whatever.
Yeah, and like and so when I was watching this, I have loved this. This one is one of my top 10 for sure. Not just because it has cheeseburger in it. And not even just because of the Stuff Mart little rap that the guys sing at the beginning, which is the best.
That's the greatest rap of all time. Like, Eminem's been real quiet since that dropped.
For real. But the thing is like, you could see it. You, as a kid even, you could be like, this is weird behavior. Because she had pictures of her neighbor's belongings in her house. To like remind her of all the stuff she didn't, right? And you're just like, it's just like, what's happening? And like she just cried, and in the French piece say, after it shows her like just being overwhelmed and start crying, this was a routine that was pretty much every day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, when I was watching that, I was watching this like yesterday or the day before, and I was like, oh my gosh, poor Bob and Larry.
Yeah.
She cries and complains every day.
She cries a lot. I didn't realize how much she cried in this episode.
It is almost annoying, if I'm being honest. As an adult now. Like, as a kid, I probably thought it was funny.
Right.
But, like, as an adult, I'm like, bro, you almost don't want to let your kid watch it. Because you're like, I don't want them to be
act
whiny.
like that. Exactly.
Yeah, this is the whole Peppa Pig problem, like, all over again. Like, George was too whiny, and so everyone was like, womp womp. But anyway, so, I mean, we could go on and on about the songs, and later we probably will talk about them. But as we mentioned, just the whole chronic, effective, this is what it said on the disconnected and discontented. This is what it called the Bovary syndrome. Madame Bovary syndrome. Chronic, effective dissatisfaction with one's life. And I'm like, if that does not describe Madame Blueberry, like what does? So these guys show up, and these sales guys show up, and they start singing this song about, oh, you want this, we have this, you want this, we have that, you need to come buy all these things. And the whole time, Bob and Larry are like, who play her butlers in this situation, they're like, I don't think that's right. I don't think more stuff is going to help you.
Right.
And so they're like, she's like, no, I think they say I don't remember what they say, but she says, how can I afford not to? Mm-hmm. And they're like, let's go get you a lot more stuff. Yeah. And so they leave, and on their way there, they see the little, I'm pretty sure her name's Annie, and she's singing the song, and she says, I thank God for the sky and my piece of apple pie. Yeah. And it's just like, the French peas like narrate that she like clocks that, like, why is that little girl so happy, and she literally has a piece of apple pie. Mm-hmm. Then they go into the store and they start gathering all this stuff, and they say that there's like a free delivery or something, and so she goes, oh yeah, sure. Yeah. And they just start sending all of this stuff
to her house. That was the original Amazon Prime right there. That's where Jeff Bezos got the idea. It was from Madame Blueberry.
He's watching it with his young kids. I guess he has kids. I don't even know nothing about this man. And they're like, oh, honey, I have an idea.
I have a great idea, honey. I know you're going to divorce me in 2024, but I have a great idea.
I have a wonderful idea. Right? And it's just wild. When you're watching this, there's really not much to this episode, honestly. No. There's lots of songs. She sings the I'm So Blue song. They come in and sing the Stuff Mart rap song, which is kind of a little... it is like a rap, but it has a very much like Music Man kind of salesman kind of vibe. And you're just like, it's great.
So good.
So great. But they get her there, and she's just, things are flying off the shelves, like literally. And there's just so much bombarding her. And then she gets there in the middle of all of that. She's got a new wig. She's got the new outfit.
Uh-huh.
Her, she looks so fancy. And then she sees Junior and his dad, and he's asking for like the train, I think.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, I'm sorry, we don't have enough for that, son. But you can get this ball.
Yeah.
Which I thought, God bless you people. Like, how great is that? It wasn't because the dad wasn't trying to be rude and like ungiving. He just really couldn't get the train. But he was like, but what about this ball? We can do this ball today.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so precious of them to put that in there. And I get it's probably because they were doing the song. But the idea of, he was like, you know what? I like this ball. And so then he sings the song. And he's like, and for this trip to the mall and my big red rubber ball.
Right.
And it's like so precious. And she sees, and I don't know if the French piece say that she sees them this time, but she sees that this time. And she just all of a sudden, it's like clicking in her head.
Yeah.
They have nothing and they're absolutely happy. I want what they have.
Right. Which I'm glad that they put that in there. And I'm sure it's probably why they did, was because, the theme of the episode is, contentment and things like that she did not have.
Absolutely.
And so like
not.
Junior wanted the train. Obviously he really wanted the train really bad.
Yes.
If he didn't want it, he wouldn't ask for it.
Yeah.
And then the dad says, no, we can't get that. How about this ball? And Junior's like, okay, it's, maybe not the train, but it's at least something that I could play with or whatever. And I do like that, because at first it was like, how you said it was Annie with the one piece of pie. And so you just see that and you're like, oh, well, I guess she's thankful that they have one piece of pie left or whatever. And so it wasn't like, for her, it wasn't, do you want this pie or do you want
something
else? And then she said, I guess I'll just take the pie. It was like, this is all we have.
Yeah.
And so it was like, that didn't really resonate with her because she just had everything. She could have whatever she wanted in a moment. And so it was like, there was that one that kind of like started to soften her up a little bit. But then when you have Junior and then he comes in and the dad says, we can't afford that big thing. What about this other thing? And instead of him having a mental breakdown, I want the train, or whatever. He's just like, okay, I'll take the ball or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, kind of makes the dam break as far as like, she's like, I'm like, I have so much stuff and there's other people that don't. Yeah,
because they don't show her checking out.
No.
They literally just show her the stuff immediately going to her house.
Yeah.
And she's just like this. And some of it is, they name all these things in the catalog at the beginning, and they do make sure to mention all of the stuff that's in the other people's houses.
Right.
And so they show her getting like all the stuff from the song and the stuff from her pictures.
Yeah.
So you would think it was all the things she would have desperately wanted her whole life.
Yeah.
And then she just sees him and she's like, wait a minute. And then he says something about, would you like to go down this other aisles or something?
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, no. And he goes, well, okay. And he's like, well, you need, and he's like trying to get her to go. And she's like, yeah, but I don't need it.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, but you don't need any of this stuff.
Right.
I think we all agree you want it.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And I thought that was a good little toss in because they don't need any. You don't really need much of anything.
No.
I mean, as long as you've got like food, shelter, and like clothing, kind of good.
Yeah.
Basic needs are covered. This lady's basic needs have been covered for a while.
Yeah.
And
she didn't have to do nothing. She got 2 butlers.
2 butlers. This lady, they made her.
What do you need 2 butlers for? First of all, what do you need 1 butler for? But why do you need 2 butlers?
And they made her house look like a mansion in the tree.
Yeah.
I mean, it was looking. They let the Annie's is like 4 sticks with like a broken sheet or something.
Yeah.
Like it was supposed to be very much. This lady was upper class compared to them, which is probably to do with that novel, honestly. But it was obvious that this lady had something going for her.
Yeah.
2 whole butlers, this huge old house with only her in it. And it's just like, and she wanted more.
Yeah.
She had to have more. She kept needing more. And then she gets the more. And she still feels the same. And that's why it's really wild. This is kind of a wild episode when you really think about it. First of all, as children, we would have had no idea what Madame Bovary was.
Right.
I mean, as adults, maybe. but they probably didn't even think to look into that because it's like, because I don't know when it said that the book might have been banned, and I don't know when and if or how and all that. So I don't know, maybe depending on where you grew up, you might not even know it existed. But I just keep thinking how crazy is how it's kind of a Disney-fied way of telling the story, obviously, because that lady had affairs and ended up unaliving herself. And I'm not trying to laugh at that. I'm just saying, I'm laughing at having to say that word. So that lady, obviously she's a tragedy.
Yeah. And
in this, they let her turn it around.
Right.
And I thought that was kind of a Disney-fied way of doing it, but also like bravo for putting that classical kind of lesson into our hearts, because discontentment can lead you down tons of roads.
Right.
That's one of the reasons why thou shalt not covet is a 10 commandment.
Exactly. Yeah, and I do think, because if you kind of fast forward where, we talk about, like God in the Bible asks for us to give him a tithe or whatever. Yeah. And, the Bible talks about like a tenth or whatever. But I think one of the more important things that I don't necessarily know if a lot of people talk about today is that if you've got $10 and you're supposed to give God $1, it has to be the first dollar, not the last dollar.
Exactly.
Because if you give him, like if you
spend all 9 and then
right,
the
basically 10. You're going to give him 10 and then trust him with the rest of the 9.
Exactly.
Rather than because it's just like if you give him the 10 at the end, that's not a tithe, that's a tip.
Yeah.
Because at the end of your meal, what do? You tip at the end of everything.
Exactly.
And then whatever you have left is what you give the waitress or whatever. And so then you have the contrast of that is like God says, give this to me first.
Yeah.
And I think if we do have that attitude of like, okay, whatever little bit of stuff I have, I'm going to give it to God first.
Exactly.
And then let him, and then if he wants you to have all the stuff from Stuff Mart, you'll get it.
You'll get it. And because this is a whole thing is, I looked up, I have some verses that we can talk about in a little bit. But what I did was I searched thankful heart in my Bible app, the YouVersion Bible app. And they're pretty good about, they've updated along the way, that it has like all plans Bible and like this. So it has like different things you can learn from those words.
Right.
And when I looked up thankful heart, of course it came up with like crazy amount of Psalms and Proverbs and things like this. And but a lot of them was making joyful noises, being a cheerful giver.
Yeah.
Like it was it was all about like having a somber mind and like all the sober mind. It was because that's what a thankful heart is, like contentment and stuff is. And I forgot to write out Philippians 4:13 and I think it's 15 through, it's probably like through 16 or something. I don't know. But like he talks about, I've been high and low and I've been this and that, but like the joy of the Lord is my strength or something.
Right.
That I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me goes with those words because it's contentment. Yeah. It is not, it's not just because, like, now I'm strong enough I can make this basketball or something. Right. Or
Adam. Free throw routine.
Yeah. Yeah, my husband used to say that, which he's not the only one. That was written on that was in the Van Oss locker room when we were in high school too, which Adam is, he was like a senior when I was a freshman. So it's about the same era. Uh-huh. But it is like everyone just used that. I think even Curry does that verse. Steph Curry does that verse. Yeah. But like everyone kind of uses the beginning of it as like literal strength. Yeah. But when you keep reading in that, and some of the verses I have is still from Philippians 4, but it's before it. Mm-hmm. Paul's not talking about literal strength in any of that chapter. He's talking about like your spirit and your like heart and your soul, like the strength you have knowing that God will provide for you. Right. And that's why I think the thankfulness song is so cool, because it says, when answers all my prayers and like all that. Like they're trying to say the relationship with God and like praying and being thankful and having like that attitude.
Right.
That is the important bit.
Yeah.
And I just think that's a really crazy lesson to try to teach like 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I mean, most adults don't know how to do that.
Right.
I mean, I struggle with that sometimes.
Yeah.
And the fact that Madame Blueberry gets to learn it from children.
Yeah.
Just, bravo,
Good
Veggie
job,
Tales.
Veggie Tales. Yeah, I don't know. It's so important, like you said. I mean, I think, like you said, adults probably deal with it because we get on to kids when, the kid will say, I want blue Play-Doh instead of red Play-Doh, or I want the train instead of the ball or whatever,
Right.
and then they just throw a fit or whatever because
Right.
they didn't get what they wanted or whatever, and we're like, I can't believe you act like that, or whatever. And we act the same
way.
Same
way.
It's like, or if it's maybe not necessarily we're coveting something like that necessarily, or it could just be like, oh well, so and so has the newest whatever, or
Exactly.
the nicer pair of shoes, or the
Exactly.
nicer house. And then another thing is like people, especially today, like there's like I don't know the exact number, but you could look it up about how like people don't stay at jobs for very long anymore.
No, oh my gosh.
Because they think, oh, well, if I go somewhere else, I'll get more money at this
Yeah.
other job. And then if I have more money, I can buy a nicer house. And if I have a nicer house, then I can, whatever. And then you do that and you're still not satisfied.
No, and what's really crazy with that, I've heard, growing up, it was like it was totally, like the goal was to stay at a place for like at least 10 years.
Yeah.
So you could get management or whatever it was.
Right.
And I just think, oh man, these hiccups every episode, bro. So these, what I think is crazy is they, pretty much have to start at base level every time.
Yeah.
So how are you ever going to get the raises if you can't stay there long enough?
Yeah.
But I actually don't have TikTok. I only watch these kind of videos through like Reels on Facebook. I don't even have Instagram. It's not because it's okay. I don't have Snapchat on principle because I don't like the way it was started. TikTok and Instagram, that's not it. It's a self-controlling, like, I need to not have any more social media in my life. I'm already overusing YouTube and Facebook. But that's where I see, like, a lot of these videos. And
Randy's algorithm on Instagram would be
wild.
Crazy.
Absolutely wild. My Facebook is already trash, like, honestly. And I don't mean that, like, in a worldly, smut kind of way, but just, like, 1 minute is showing me the Wicked trailer. For the Wicked the movie, and the next minute it's showing me like how to make like Play-Doh puppets. Like it's just, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't look like an adult algorithm at all. But I'm just saying, like, I watch these videos and they're complaining about all these jobs and stuff, and it does make me nervous because I've only worked for like family and like friends, and I haven't had very many like worldly, what you would consider like worldly jobs. But at the same time, I'm like, but I've worked at these places for years. The only time, I mean, I worked for the gospel station for seriously like 15 something years or something.
Right.
It was a really long time, honestly.
Yeah.
Like in the grand scheme of things, if that wasn't my family, I would have been like assistant to the regional manager.
Right.
Like assistant to the assistant regional manager would have been my starting position, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, it was just, like, I joke about that all the time. Like, where would I have been if this would have been, like, Caleb or something?
Yeah.
Like, I technically would have worked my way up from the mailroom, like, really.
Right.
And anyway, but the whole thing is like, these people are complaining. And it's like, well, work at McDonald's and do the work then.
Yeah.
You're not wanting to do the work. And I get it. I went to college, too. I don't use my degree either. And I did get a theater degree, so that's probably my bad. I mean, but still, like, if I started, like, babysitting people, and I started doing this, and I started doing that, so who cares I didn't have, so I'm not on Broadway. Does it kind of hurt? A little bit sometimes,
Right.
but also, I'm not so stupid to think I'm the next, like, Indina Menzel or something.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to be picked up for, like, Frozen 10. like because I was like all these cool people on Broadway,
9.
Shrek
so
9.
Many Shreks.
You know, like I'm not that like arrogant.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem is such discontentment. Like, do the work. Be thankful for what you have.
Right.
It's an easy place to start, people.
Yeah,
That's why this song rocks so much.
Gosh, VeggieTales. But yeah, and then then you put a whole another degree on it of like, I mean, it's one thing, if God says, okay, you're done here, find something else or
Exactly.
whatever, or I have something else for you.
Exactly.
Or whatever, and but a lot of times it's just I don't want to work here anymore. I don't feel any kind of, I basically, and it probably just originates from you see somebody else that may be online. And I do think that's part of the reason why it's so bad now.
Yeah.
Is because like when you have a bad day, you don't post your bad day pictures on Facebook. You post the good
days.
pictures, the time when the kids are
perfect.
Getting along and perfect.
Your
and
house
whatever.
is actually clean.
The house is kind of clean.
The meal didn't burn.
The meal didn't burn. You post those things on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. You never post my kids were screaming all day long and throwing fits and maybe and then I feel like even when people do that, it's just to get pity.
It's a pity party.
Oh, well, we're sorry.
Yeah.
That whatever. Or
yeah, because I thought, for a while, I thought, I'm just going to post whatever. And I felt like, now I just look like I want attention.
Yeah, exactly. And so I do think that, social media and
it's just
the world today makes it worse.
Yeah.
So I do think this is an episode that, it was probably for kids in a obviously kids need to know that if your parents say, hey, you can't get the train, we need to get the ball, that there's a life lesson there of, okay, you know what, I'm at least still getting something. And even if you're not getting a train or a ball, you still at least have stuff probably at home or whatever. And so I don't know.
I thought that's, I wholeheartedly agree with that because I think the earlier you can learn to be okay with what you have, okay with where you're at in your life. It doesn't say in the show that good stuff isn't coming. Mm-hmm. It just says be okay with where you are.
Right.
And I think the quicker you can learn that, the better. And I have a really cute story to go with this. So I'll shout out to my daughter Alice.
Hey.
She was on the Silly Song episode.
We need to have her back.
Call
in if you want. Oh, yeah, actually you can. Never mind. We'll talk about that later.
Well, message us on Facebook.
On Facebook.
So she when she was really little, we were teaching her this kind of thankfulness, being thankful in the heart. She was having some problems. So we were kind of going through what love is and what love does. Like we would say, is love rude and hateful or is love kind? And she just had a hard time not being negative for whatever reason. And so I had to get this jar out. And every time she'd get really cranky and she'd start complaining to me about stuff. One jar had a sad face on it and we just had beads in it. And the other jar had a happy face on it. And she'd have to go, I was like, jar, you owe me 5 happy remarks or happy thoughts. Because she was just being.
Yeah.
And I would be like, no, go back. I had the love chapter, basically permanently sitting out so I could pick it up and show her what love is and what we are. And so she would have to be so she'd say, Mom, my shoes don't fit and Bubba's being cranky or whatever it was. Those girls at school were being rude again and just things always complaining about something. She'd walk over I'd say, okay, you owe me 5 grateful thoughts. And so she'd have to pick up a bead and have to say out loud, I'm thankful we had pancakes at breakfast today, jar. I'm thankful. And we started doing so we worked so hard on this that year at Christmas. She unwraps the wrapping paper and the box was for a space heater. Mm-hmm. And she literally yells out, yay, I'm getting a heater. And I don't even remember who got her the present, but they were like, no, babe, look in the box. Uh-huh. And everyone busted out laughing. And they were like, bro, guys, we could have gotten her a heater and she would have been happy.
Yeah.
And whatever was inside the box, I don't remember, but But I was just so like, oh, she got it.
Yeah.
Because and to this day we joke about that because it was like if you would have seen her face, you would the pure joy. She obviously didn't really want the heater,
right?
But the look on her face was like, I'm gonna be thankful, because I know that's best. And it was just so cute because she was just like, yay, a heater. And then she opens it and it was probably like Minnie Mouse blanket or something,
right? But
I'll never forget that because every once in a while I bring out the jars and fun fact, if you have a glass jar, you can write on it with permanent marker, and then you can use hand sanitizer to clean it off later. So if you ever need like saving for a trip and you're wanting it to be a visual, in my household, we're very visual people. So I try to do everything like tangible as much as possible. We're very visual, like touching, learning is how we learn. And so, I make them do a lot of stuff when I'm trying to teach a lesson. So just words. And I will tell you, we had to do that with Aaron. He's still, every once in a while, kind of needs it. But it took about a week. And both of them were like, okay, I get what you're saying now. Yeah. And it wasn't even that, like, it wasn't punishment, but it was like they could physically see how cranky they were.
Right.
So if you're wanting thankfulness lesson, I suggest making your kids do that. It was wild. It doesn't, you can make them do it every day. Maybe they'll like to and they'll want to do it. Or you can do it as like not necessarily like a punishment, but like a discipline.
Yeah.
But I will never forget that because it was like, and to this day, she really will be very, my kids, I'll tell them before we go places, remember, this is not about what we get. It's about who we're with. Yeah. And we're going to be thankful for whatever. Everybody's lives are different. We don't know what people can get and not get. And we don't know what, we don't know what they're getting us. We just know what we got them.
Right.
And they're pretty good about it. I'm sure Amy will have to start learning that lesson soon because she's old enough to sound cranky about stuff. But anyway, I just really wanted to throw that out there. But let's go to, we'll talk about the closing countertop because this is where Larry says, hold me, Bob.
Hold me, Bob.
And Bob says, I would if I could, man.
Because they're crying.
Because they're crying their faces off.
And then the French peas show up again.
The French peas have to close out the show
like, Don't you know you gotta close the show out?
And so they say, Madam Blueberry learned that being greedy makes you grumpy. And then they talk about having a thankful heart. But the verse is Proverbs 15:27a. I wrote down from my ESV version, so it's going to sound slightly different than what they actually say if you go watch this one. But it says, whoever is greedy for unjust gain troubles his own household. And B would be, but he who hates bribes will live. So the whole vibe of this of that verse is to not be greedy and like discontented. All right, so we've got Philippians 4:6-8. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your request be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your mind in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And I was like, I felt that really was like.
Yeah.
And I have Psalms 95:1-2. Hold on, my Kindle's covering one of the words. Okay. Oh, come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation. Let us come into his presence with thanksgiving. Let us make a joyful noise to him with songs of praise. And I thought those two really kind of captured kind of what this episode was talking about.
Yeah.
They, because the whole thing is the attitude. It's what you're living your life, and the kind of the whole gospel connection we kind of talk about. They do. I don't know how to say it because like without sounding kind of weird, but they do kind of mention like, they do try to make the whole beginning of the episode is trying to make her want things.
Yeah.
she says, I want what the little girl and the little boy has. And when I heard that the other day, I was like, bro, gospel connection.
It's deep.
Because that's what the whole thing is. We're supposed to live as a living testimony to the Lord. And I thought that was really cool that in Psalms it says, let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation. That's from the Old Testament.
Yeah.
It's saying the rock of our salvation, like even still, it's like way back then, they knew it was outside of them where their joy comes from and all of this. It comes from the Lord.
Yeah.
Who is our Savior? He back in the Old Testament, they would literally have like angel armies coming and defending you and things like that. And then Jesus comes and he's literally the cornerstone on which our future, like our eternity is built upon. He's literally our rock of our salvation. And I just thought she wanted what the kids had, where it was joy in the Lord. And they don't really, obviously in VeggieTales, they're not going to be like, oh, I'm saved and you're not. Because that's not the point of these shows. But I thought that was so great that they snuck that in there. Because we're supposed to be this living testimony. And if we're making joyful noises and, where, like in Philippians where it says, guard your hearts and your mind in Christ Jesus. Like that's like these honorable things we're supposed to be thinking about. It goes hand in hand with like the fruits of the Spirit.
Oh yeah.
It goes hand in hand with like what Paul says with being like how he's been high and low and all this. All of that goes hand in hand, because when you have the Lord in your heart, where does your joy come from? It comes from him.
Right.
Who is worthy? They looked in all of heaven, and who was worthy of praise? Jesus was. That's who could open the scroll? Jesus could.
Yeah.
Like, and I just was like,
yeah, and to finish up with that is like, you talk about the fruits of the Spirit, when you do live your life with love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, goodness, self-control. When you do live like that, the world doesn't live like that.
No.
And so when you do live, because Jesus says, to be an example, to be an ambassador, things like that.
Go out into the world and teach these things. Go out into
the world, teach these things, and it's like the old thing about like, people don't care how much you know, they want to know how much you care.
Exactly.
And when you live by those fruits, when you show those fruits, the world doesn't show those fruits. So when they see that in you, they'll wonder why you act that way, how you act that way.
Yeah.
And then it's a perfect opportunity for a gospel presentation.
Exactly. And there was this podcast I was listening to. I don't know who they were talking about. I don't remember who they were talking about. Don't remember the podcast. I'm sorry. I know. Ugh. But they said they were talking about Christians, and they were saying that this guy, I do remember what it was. Okay, so the Paul brothers, like Logan and Jake Paul, had this podcast, and one of the guys on there, his name's George, when he's got his own podcast now. Logan Paul was apologizing to him for making fun of him about being a Christian.
Yeah.
Because that's how this guy, he was on their podcast with them. This whole thing went down. You could do a YouTube deep dive if you want to. It's actually kind of crazy. But they had been like super great friends, all this something. The George guy talks about his faith, which the Paul brothers knew about. And they made fun of him, and like this whole thing blew up. So it's this video about him apologizing to him. And he's talking about, but he says to him, he specifically, I think it might be Logan who's talking, but he specifically says, you weren't like the other Christians I knew. You were living in such a way that was different than other people who had called themselves Christians. And I saw something in you I didn't see in others.
Yeah.
I saw something in you I didn't even see in me. And I'm sorry that I treated you that way. But that's it. I'm like, that's the testimony.
Right.
Like he was such a good friend. He was such a good like coworker. He was such a good blah, blah, blah. That it came after the dust had settled. This guy realized that like he was worthy of like an apology and to be someone who really does show Christ.
Yeah.
And I just thought, like, how awesome is that? Like, this guy was coming to work and doing all this stuff, and when he finally put his foot down and stood up for it, and he was persecuted, he was like, I'm sorry, I got to go.
Yeah.
Went started his own other podcast, and he's doing really great. He's had all sorts of, I think he's had Russell Brand, he's had like Ben Shapiro, he's all these other people on there, but I just thought that was really cool that he's like, he specifically mentioned seeing something else in him.
Right.
And I was just like, that's how I want to be. I want to be my test. I want to be that person. I want to be like, what do you have? I want it.
Yeah.
And we joke around with that about our kids all the time. Cause we're like, dang, like we joke around like, what are they on?
Right.
What do they have? How do they have all this energy? If we could bottle it up, we'd be rich.
Right.
When I die, we've had a funeral in the family lately. And one of the things we were kind of joking around about, like what we would say at ours, because, like sometimes they get a little long.
Yeah. And
so we kind of joke around with like how you'd make it shorter or what we would want them to sing and stuff. And that was one of the things that got me thinking is, how cool is it? How cool would it be? Is at the end of my life, someone was like, we saw Jesus in her.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what Madame Blueberry learned in this, was like, she saw the attitude, that kind of the fruit of the spirit kind of attitude in these kids. And she's like, I want that.
Yeah.
And I know that's kind of putting words into the VeggieTales people's mouths, but honestly, I really think that was supposed to be part of the lesson we were learning.
Yeah.
Is like, live this out.
Yeah.
It's not just be thankful, but like live it out. But anyway.
Yeah.
Lesson in thankfulness, I believe, is what it's called.
Great episode. You should go watch it if you've never seen it.
It's really great.
Fast forward past her scream or crying, and you'll be okay.
Yeah, she gets a little. The "I'm So Blue" song is a little whiny, but past that,
yeah, so good.
Her. I know they're doing it, so when she's thankful, it's better. But even her cry is like, it's so terrible. It sounds like a cranky baby.
All right. Well, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you.
And if you get a heater,
be thankful
for it. Be like Alice. Hashtag be like Alice.
Yeah. We'll be doing some Christmas episodes coming up
very soon.
So we might mention a few more thankfulness moments to have.
Yeah. There you go.
But in this season of thankfulness, I would say I am thankful for your friendship, Matthew.
I'm thankful for you, Randy. All right. Well, God made you special.
And he loves you very much.
Bye.